The massive alien vessel Harmony of Spheres drifted silently through the void, its crystalline hull catching starlight like a prism. For 3 cycles, they had been tracking the strange ship that had appeared at the edge of their territory. Commander Zeknara pressed her 4-fingered hand against the scanner console, watching the readings with growing confusion. "This makes no sense," she whispered to her second-in-command, Officer Velhan. "The vessel appears to be constructed from primitive metals, yet it moves with impossible precision." Velhan's large, dark eyes reflected the scanner's blue glow. "Perhaps it's a derelict, Commander, drifting on momentum alone." "No." Zeknara's voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded deep space vessels for over 2 decades. "Look at these readings. The ship is actively powered, and there are life signs aboard. Hundreds of them." The bridge of the Harmony of Spheres hummed with quiet efficiency. The Kethani had been the dominant spacefaring species in this sector for millennia. Their technology was elegant, their society peaceful, their expansion methodical and careful. They had encountered 17 different intelligent species, and each first contact had followed the same pattern: cautious observation, peaceful communication, eventual trade agreements. This time felt different. "Commander," called Navigator Jen Callis from her station. "The unknown vessel has changed course. It's heading directly toward us." Zeknara felt her breathing quicken. The alien ship had been meandering through space for days, seemingly without purpose. Now it moved with sudden, deliberate intent. "Raise shields," she ordered, "but keep weapon systems powered down. We don't want to appear threatening." On the main display, the human warship Defiance grew larger as it approached. To the Kethani eyes, it looked crude and dangerous, all sharp angles and exposed weapon ports. Unlike their own vessels, which were designed for beauty as much as function, this ship seemed built for one purpose only: war. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission," announced Communications Officer Mortellus. "It's strange. The signal is incredibly basic, almost primitive, but it's carrying massive amounts of data. Can you decode it?" "Working on it now." Mortellus manipulated the holographic interface with practiced movements. "There are mathematical sequences, what appears to be linguistic patterns, and, Commander, they're sending visual data." The main screen flickered, then displayed a series of images. First came simple mathematical concepts: addition, multiplication, geometric shapes, then more complex diagrams showing atomic structures, solar systems, and finally, "By the 7 moons," breathed Velhan. The final image showed a bipedal creature standing upright. It had pale skin, forward-facing eyes, and what appeared to be primitive clothing. The being raised one hand in what could only be interpreted as a greeting. "They're trying to communicate," Zeknara said. "Prepare a response using the same format. Show them we understand." As the communications team worked frantically to craft a reply, the human ship continued its approach. It was now close enough that the Harmony's sensors could perform detailed scans. What they found changed everything. "Commander," whispered sensor specialist Kolvarin, her voice tight with disbelief. "You need to see this immediately." Zeknara moved to the sensor station, her footsteps silent on the ship's organic flooring. "What is it?" "The interior scans of their vessel." Kolvarin hesitated. "Commander, there are over 800 life forms on that ship, but they're not just crew." "Explain." "Some of them are small, much smaller than the others, and there are readings that suggest—" She paused, checking her instruments again. "Commander, I think some of these beings are their offspring." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. In all their centuries of space travel, the Kethani had never encountered a species that brought their young on military vessels. It went against every logical principle of warfare and exploration. "There's more," Kolvarin continued. "The ship's internal structure shows spaces that aren't military in nature. Recreation areas, what appears to be educational facilities, even what might be living quarters for family units." Zeknara felt a chill run through her elongated spine. "Are you telling me this is a military vessel carrying families?" That's exactly what I'm telling you, Commander. Before anyone could respond, the communications console erupted with activity. Mortellus looked up with wide eyes. Commander, they're responding to our transmission, but they're not just sending mathematical concepts. What are they sending? Music, Commander. They're sending us music. The bridge speakers filled with a haunting melody, simple at first, then growing more complex. It spoke of longing and hope, of vast distances traveled and homes left behind. Even without understanding the species that created it, every Cathani on the bridge could feel the emotion it carried. By the ancient codes, whispered Velhan. What kind of warriors send music as their first greeting? As if in response to his question, the human ship slowed to a stop just outside weapons range. It hung in space, neither advancing nor retreating, its crude hull somehow managing to convey patience. Commander, said Mortellus, we're receiving another transmission. This one appears to be a direct communication attempt. Put it through. The screen flickered, then cleared to show the interior of the human ship. The being that appeared was similar to the one in the first image, but different. This one had darker skin and short, dark hair. It wore what appeared to be a uniform of some kind, and behind it, Zeknara could see others moving about what was clearly a command center. The human opened its mouth and began making sounds, complex vocalizations that carried meaning the universal translator couldn't yet interpret. But even without understanding the words, the tone was clear, peaceful, cautious, hopeful. Then something happened that made every Cathani on the bridge gasp. A smaller figure appeared at the edge of the screen, clearly one of the young ones. Their sensors had detected. The small human said something to the adult, who smiled and gently guided the child away from the communication device. They brought their children, Zeknara said quietly. These beings crossed the void of space carrying. They're most vulnerable. But why? Asked Velhan. What could drive a species to such an extreme? Before anyone could answer, the sensor array began chiming with new alerts. Kolvaren bent over her instruments, her face growing pale. Commander, we have multiple contacts approaching from the rimward sectors. 3 ships, configuration unknown, but they're moving fast and their energy signatures suggest heavy armament. Can you identify them? Negative, but... Commander, they're moving in attack formation directly toward the human vessel. On the screen, the human captain seemed to notice something. His expression changed, becoming tense and alert. He spoke rapidly to someone off-screen, then turned back to the communication device. His next words were accompanied by urgent gestures. He's trying to warn us, Zeknara realized. But warn us about what? The answer came as 3 sleek, predatory shapes dropped out of hyperspace. The Cathani had never seen ships like these, black as the void, bristling with weapons, and moving with lethal purpose. Red alert, Zeknara commanded. All stations, battle positions. But even as her crew sprang into action, she watched the human ship with growing amazement. Instead of fleeing or preparing to defend only themselves, the crude vessel was moving to place itself between the approaching threat and the harmony of spheres. They're protecting us, breathed Velhan. A species we just met, and they're putting themselves at risk to protect us. Commander, called Kolvaren, the unknown ships are charging weapons. Impact in 47 seconds. Zeknara made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Move us to support the human vessel. If they're willing to stand with us, we'll stand with them. But Commander, we don't know anything about them. They could be... Look at that ship, Velhan. Really look at it. Does that seem like the vessel of a species bent on conquest? The answer came not in words, but in action. As the enemy ships opened fire, the human vessel responded with a ferocity that defied its crude appearance. Weapon ports that had seemed primitive blazed with energy that matched anything in the Cathani arsenal. But what happened next would be remembered in both species' histories for centuries to come. As the battle raged, the human ship's internal communications accidentally broadcast across all frequencies. The Cathani bridge crew heard something that changed their understanding of warfare forever. They heard the human captain's voice, calm and steady despite the chaos around them. All families to secure zones. Teaching staff, maintain normal schedules. In the protected sections. Children should not see this. Then, from somewhere deeper in the ship, came the sound of young voices singing the same melody they had transmitted as their greeting. The human children were singing to comfort themselves and each other while their parents fought to protect them. "What are they?" whispered Mortellus. Zeknara watched as the human ship took hit after hit, its shields flaring and failing, but never wavering in its protection of the smaller, more vulnerable Cathani vessel. "I don't know," she replied, "but I think we're about to find out." The battle raged for 23 minutes. To the crew of the Harmony of Spheres, it felt like an eternity. Captain Sarah Chen of the human warship Defiance watched her tactical display with the calm focus that had made her one of Earth's most respected deep space commanders. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency despite the ship shuddering under enemy fire. "Forward shields at 30%, reported Lieutenant Commander James Rodriguez from the tactical station. "Hull breach on Deck 7, but it's contained. Keep us between the aliens and those attack ships," Chen ordered. "I don't care what it costs us." Chief Engineer Patricia Okafor's voice crackled over the comm from the engine room. "Captain, I can give you 15 more minutes at maximum power, but after that we're going to start losing primary systems." "Understood, Chief. Make it count." On the other side of the battlefield, Commander Zeknara struggled to comprehend what she was witnessing. The human ship fought with a desperate ferocity, but also with something else, a tactical sophistication. That seemed impossible for such a primitive-looking vessel. "Their weapon targeting is incredibly precise," reported Velhan. "They're managing to hit critical systems while avoiding areas that would cause catastrophic damage to enemy crews." "What does that mean?" "Commander, I think they're trying to disable rather than destroy. Even in combat, they're attempting to preserve life." The 3 unknown attackers, ships that would later be identified as belonging to the violent Sectar Empire, pressed their assault with ruthless efficiency. Their vessels were sleek instruments of war designed for one purpose: overwhelming destruction. But they had made a critical error in their calculations. They had not accounted for human ingenuity. "Rodriguez, are you seeing what I'm seeing?" Captain Chen asked. "Yes, ma'am." "The enemy ships are using a rotating shield matrix. Very sophisticated, but it has a pattern. A 3-second gap every 47 seconds. Exactly. If we time it right." Chen keyed the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We're going to execute a synchronized strike in 60 seconds. I need everyone to hold on." In the protected sections of the ship, families continued their daily routines as much as possible. Dr. Emily Watson, the ship's head of pediatric services, moved through the children's area with calm efficiency, checking on the youngest passengers. "Are we going to be okay, Dr. Watson?" asked 8-year-old Marcus Kim, his dark eyes wide with concern. "We're going to be fine, sweetheart," she replied, kneeling to his level. "Your parents and all the other grown-ups are very good at keeping us safe. But why are those ships trying to hurt us?" It was a question that had plagued humanity since they first reached the stars. Why did they always seem to encounter hostility in the void? Why did first contact so often end in violence? "I don't know, Marcus, but I know your mom and dad won't let anything happen to you." Above them, on the bridge, Captain Chen watched the tactical display count down. "On my mark." The Defiance executed a maneuver that should have been impossible for a ship of its size. All power was redirected to engines for exactly 2.3 seconds, allowing them to slide past the enemy formation. In that moment, every weapon on the ship fired in perfect synchronization, targeting the gap in the enemy shields. The result was devastating. 2 of the 3 Sectar ships were crippled instantly, their weapon systems destroyed but their life support intact. The 3rd ship, damaged but still functional, began to retreat. On the Harmony of Spheres, the bridge crew watched in stunned silence. "How did they do that?" whispered Kolvarin. "The power redistribution alone should have overloaded their systems." "I'm reading massive energy spikes throughout their ship," reported Velhan. "But instead of causing failures, their systems are somehow adapting in real time." Commander Zeknara studied the human vessel with new eyes. What she had taken for primitive construction now revealed itself as something else entirely. Adaptive engineering. The ship wasn't built to rigid specifications like Kethani vessels. It was designed to be modified, upgraded, and reconfigured as needed. They built their ship to grow with them, she realized. It's not a finished product, it's a living system that evolves. The communication channel suddenly crackled to life. Captain Chen's image appeared on their screen, and for the first time they could see the full bridge of a human warship. It was nothing like what they expected. Instead of the sterile, militaristic environment they assumed would exist on a war vessel, the human bridge was filled with personal touches. Photos of families were visible at workstations. Someone had placed a small flowering plant near the navigation console. The walls displayed artwork that was clearly made by children, bright, optimistic drawings of space exploration, and peaceful meetings with alien species. Captain Chen spoke, and this time, their universal translator had had enough linguistic data to provide a basic interpretation. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the human colonial ship Defiance. We have neutralized the immediate threat. Are you injured? Do you require assistance? Colonial ship. The words hit the Kethani bridge crew like a physical blow. Did T.B. Boon, they say colonial ship? Asked Mortellus. Commander, said Colvarin, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to share something with you. The detailed scans of their vessel. It's not just a military ship carrying families. What do you mean? Commander, that ship contains everything needed to establish a permanent settlement. Seeds, genetic material, manufacturing equipment, educational resources, cultural archives. They're not just traveling with their children, they're traveling with their entire future. The implications crashed over Zeknara like a wave. They're refugees. No, Commander, it's more than that. Look at the ship's construction, the way they fight, the way they protect others even when meeting them for the first time. This isn't a species fleeing destruction. Then what is it? Velhan answered quietly. I think it's a species that has learned that the universe is dangerous, so they carry everything they value with them. They don't leave their families behind because they've learned that sometimes you can't go home, Ande. The human ship Captain Chen was receiving reports from throughout the vessel. The battle had caused damage but nothing critical. More importantly, no lives had been lost. Captain, said Lieutenant Rodriguez, we're receiving a transmission from the alien vessel. It appears to be a thank you, along with a request for direct communication. Put them through. The screen filled with the image of Commander Zeknara. Despite the differences in their species, both captains immediately recognized something in each other. The weight of command, the responsibility for lives, the burden of making decisions in the void. I am Commander Zeknara of the Kethani. Vessel, Harmony of Spheres, she said, her words now translated clearly. You risked your lives to protect us, though we are strangers. Why? Captain Chen was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer. Behind her, the bridge crew continued their work, but she could feel their attention on this moment. Because, she said finally, that's what people do. When someone is in danger, you help them. It doesn't matter if you've never met them before. Your ship carries young ones, Zeknara continued. You put them at risk to save us. No, Chen replied firmly. We put ourselves at risk to save you. Our children are the most protected people on this ship. But they're also learning by watching us. If we teach them that you only help people who look like you or think like you, what kind of universe are we creating for them? The answer seemed to resonate across the communication channel. On the Kethani bridge, officers exchanged glances of wonder and confusion. Where are you traveling? Zeknara asked. To establish a new colony world about 40 light years from here. We've been in space for 18 months, and we have another 6 months to go. But why bring families on such a dangerous journey? Why not send only your military forces first, then bring the others when it's safe? Captain Chen smiled, and in that expression, Zeknara saw something that her species' philosophy had never quite grasped. Because safe is relative, Commander. We learned a long time ago that nowhere is ever completely safe. But also, she gestured to the activity around her bridge. We learned that the journey is just as important as the destination. These children aren't passengers. They're part of the mission. They're learning about space, about other species, about what it means to explore and build something new. By the time we reach our new world, they'll be ready to help create it. You're teaching them to be explorers by making them explorers, Velhan said quietly to his commander. There is more, Chen continued. Our species has a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. On our ship, everyone is part of that village. Our engineers teach mathematics to the children while they work. Our medical staff teach biology. Our pilots teach physics. The children aren't separate from our mission. They are our mission. Commander Zeknara felt something shift in her understanding of the universe. What happens if you encounter more hostility like this? What happens if your ship is destroyed? Then we will have fought to protect something worth protecting, Chen replied simply. But Commander, we don't travel alone because we're weak. We travel together because it makes us stronger. As if to demonstrate her point, a young voice suddenly echoed through the human ship's communication system. Mom, Dad's back from the engine room, Captain Chen chuckled. That would be my daughter. She's 8, and she thinks the whole ship revolves around her family's schedule. Your offspring travels with you on the bridge? Sometimes. All the children do. They need to see what we do, understand the choices we make. How else will they learn to make good choices themselves? The concept was revolutionary to the Cathani. Their young were carefully protected and educated in specialized facilities. The idea of children being present during military operations, learning from direct observation. Commander Zeknara, Chen continued, would you be willing to meet face to face? I think our species have much to learn from each other. Before Zeknara could answer, her sensor specialist called out urgently, Commander, multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Configuration suggests sector reinforcements. On the human ship, alarms began sounding again, but this time, Captain Chen's expression was different. This time, she was not facing the unknown alone. Commander, she said to Zeknara, it appears we're about to learn if two very different species can fight side by side. Zeknara looked around her bridge, seeing the faces of her crew. They had witnessed something unprecedented today. A species that carried their most vulnerable into the void not out of recklessness, but out of a fundamental belief that strength came from unity. Captain Chen, she replied, the Cathani stand with you. As the enemy ships approached, both vessels prepared for battle. But something had changed in the space between them. What had begun as a chance encounter between strangers was becoming something else entirely. It was becoming an alliance. Chapter 3. What Makes a Human? The second wave of sector ships was larger than the first. 7 vessels, each one a predator built for maximum destruction. They dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their black hulls seeming to absorb the starlight around them. Captain Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance, studying the tactical display. Beside her, Dr. Marcus Webb, the ship's chief science officer, worked frantically at his station. Captain, I'm analyzing the wreckage from the first engagement, he reported. The energy signatures from those ships, they're using some kind of neural interface technology. The ships respond to thought as much as to controls, which means their reaction times are going to be significantly faster than ours. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez looked up from his tactical station. Captain, with respect, maybe, we should consider retreat. 7 ships against 2, and we still have families aboard. No. The voice came not from Captain Chen, but from 8-year-old Sarah Kim, who had somehow wandered onto the bridge despite the alert status. Every adult turned to look at the small girl, who stood with her hands on her hips and a determined expression on her face. Sarah, sweetheart, you need to get back to the safe area, Dr. Watson said gently, appearing in the doorway. But I heard what that man said, Sarah replied, pointing at Rodriguez. He said we should run away because we have kids on the ship. Captain Chen knelt down to Sarah's level. What do you think we should do? We should help the nice aliens, Sarah said matter-of-factly. That's what you always tell us. If someone needs help, you help them. Even if it's scary. But it is scary, Chen replied seriously. And dangerous. Mom says dangerous things are just things that require more thinking, Sarah answered. So we should think harder. From his mouth of babes, Chen thought. She stood up and looked around her bridge. You heard the lady. We think harder. On the harmony of spheres, Commander Zeknara watched the approaching enemy fleet with growing concern. The Kethani were not a militaristic species by nature. Their ships were designed for exploration and trade, with defensive capabilities but limited offensive power. Commander, said Velhan, our shields can withstand perhaps 3 minutes of concentrated fire from a fleet that size. The humans may be skilled, but they cannot possibly. Yes, they can, interrupted Kolvaren, her voice filled with amazement as she studied her sensor readings. Commander, you need to see this. Zeknara moved to the sensor station. What am I looking at? The human ship is reconfiguring itself in real time. Watch. On the display, they could see the Defiance undergoing rapid structural changes. Wepnoi. Ports were shifting position, shield generators were being redistributed, and entire sections of the hull were rearranging themselves. That's impossible, breathed Velhan. No ship can reconfigure its basic structure during operations. Humans can, Kolvarn replied. Commander, their entire vessel is modular. Every system, every component is designed to be moved, modified, or repurposed as needed. They didn't just build a ship, they built a machine that builds itself, as if to prove her point, the Defiance completed its transformation. What had been a somewhat crude-looking exploration vessel now revealed itself as something far more sophisticated, an adaptive weapons platform that could shift its capabilities based on the tactical situation. Incredible, whispered Zeknara. They carry their children not despite the danger, but because they've learned to make the danger manageable. Captain Chen's voice came over the communication channel. Commander Zeknara, we're transmitting tactical data to your ship. We have a plan, but it's going to require precise coordination. What do you need us to do? Trust us, and be ready to move fast. The Sektar fleet approached in a wedge formation, their weapons charging. These were not explorers or traders. They were conquerors who had subjugated dozens of worlds through overwhelming force and brutality. They had never encountered humans before. All ships target the primitive vessel first, commanded Warlord Theknazal from the lead Sektar ship. Once it is destroyed, the other will surrender. It was a reasonable tactical assessment based on appearances. The human ship looked crude and improvised compared to the elegant Kithani vessel. Logic suggested it would be the weaker target. Logic, however, had never met a human protective instinct. Here they come, Captain Chen announced to her crew. Remember, we've got 800 people on this ship who are counting on us. Let's not let them down. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The Defiance didn't wait for the enemy to come to them. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the center of the Sektar formation, a maneuver so unexpected and apparently suicidal that the enemy fleet hesitated for a crucial 2 seconds. Those 2 seconds were enough. As the human ship dove into the heart of the enemy formation, it began a maneuver that defied every principle of space combat. Instead of maintaining formation integrity, it deliberately destabilized its flight path, spinning and tumbling in what appeared to be a loss of control. The Sektar ships converged on what they thought was a crippled target, only to discover they had been drawn into a trap. The Defiance's erratic movements weren't random. They were calculated to keep the enemy ships from achieving target locks while positioning them exactly where Captain Chen wanted them. Now, she commanded. Every weapon port on the human ship fired simultaneously, but not at the enemy vessels. Instead, they targeted the space around them, creating a web of energy that ionized the local space-time fabric. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Sektar fleet. Their ships, designed for neural interface control, found their systems overwhelmed by the electromagnetic chaos. For 37 seconds, they were effectively blind and deaf. 37 seconds was More than enough time for the harmony of spheres to position itself for a devastating surprise attack. "Fire all weapons," commanded Zeknara, and her crew obeyed with enthusiasm. The Chthoni ship's elegant energy weapons lanced out with surgical precision, disabling the enemy vessels one by one. By the time the Sektar ships regained their senses, 5 of the 7 were crippled and the remaining 2 were retreating at maximum speed. "Impossible," breathed Warlord Theknazal as his flagship limped away. No primitive species should possess such tactics. He would spend the rest of his military career trying to understand what he had witnessed. He would never succeed, because he was looking for the wrong thing. He was looking for advanced technology, superior weapons, or brilliant strategy. He never considered that he had encountered something far more dangerous, a species that fought not for conquest or glory, but for the simple desire to protect what they loved. In the aftermath of the battle, as both ships moved to assist the disabled Sektar vessels, a concept that thoroughly confused the would-be conquerors, Commander Zeknara finally got her answer to the question that had been bothering her since first contact. "Captain Chen," she said over the communication channel, "I must ask you something directly. Your species, are you warriors or explorers?" Captain Chen smiled, and in the background, Zeknara could see human children helping with the damage control efforts, carrying tools and supplies under the watchful eyes of adults. "Commander," Chen replied, "we're parents. Everything else is just details." The simple answer contained a profound truth that would reshape the Chthoni understanding of strength and survival. Here was a species that didn't separate their civilian and military functions, because they understood that the ultimate military objective was not victory in battle, but the continuation and protection of their way of life. "Your children," Zeknara observed. "They're not afraid." "Oh, they're definitely afraid," Chen corrected. "Fear is a healthy response to danger, but we've taught them that being afraid doesn't mean being helpless. Fear can motivate you to think more clearly, work harder, and care more deeply about the people around you." As if to demonstrate the point, young Sarah Kim appeared on the screen again, this time carrying a data pad twice her size. "Mom, Dr. Webb says the alien ships use something called neural interfaces," she announced proudly. "I drew a picture of how I think it works. Want to see?" Captain Chen took the data pad and looked at the drawing. A child's interpretation of complex neural machine interfaces, complete with colorful annotations and helpful arrows. "This is actually quite insightful," she said, showing the drawing to Dr. Webb, who nodded in amazement. "Commander Zeknara," Chen continued, "would you like to know the real secret of human adaptability? Please. We never stop learning, and we never assume that wisdom comes only from adults. Some of our best innovations have come from children, asking simple questions that adults had forgotten to ask." On the Chthoni bridge, officers exchanged glances of wonder. Their own society carefully separated education from operation, children from adults, learning from doing. "Your species integrates everything," Zeknara said, understanding dawning in her voice. "We have to," Chen replied. "We're always traveling, to new places, facing new challenges, meeting new species. We can't afford to waste any intelligence, any creativity, any perspective. Whether you're 8 years old or 80, if you have a good idea, we want to hear it. And if the idea is wrong, then we learn from the mistake and try again. Commander, the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't being wrong, it's being so afraid of being wrong that you stop trying." As the 2 ships worked together to secure the battlefield and tend to the wounded Sektar survivors, a new understanding began to form between the species. The Chthoni had encountered something they had never imagined, a civilization that had learned to thrive not despite its vulnerabilities, but because of them. "Captain Chen," Zeknara said finally, "when you reach your new colony world, what will you do there?" "Build a home," Chen replied simply. "Schools for the children, workshops for the inventors, laboratories for the scientists, theaters for the artists. We'll farm and explore and make mistakes and learn from them. And someday when the children are grown, some of them will build new ships and go looking for other new worlds." "And you'll let them go?" "Commander, the point of raising children isn't to keep them with you forever. It's to prepare them to make the universe a better place than the one you found. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert from the sensor stations of both ships. "Commander, massive energy signature approaching," reported Kolvarin. It's enormous." On the Defiance, Dr. Webb looked up from his instruments with wide eyes. "Captain, whatever's coming is bigger than both our ships combined, and it's moving impossibly fast." Both captains looked at their respective tactical displays as a new ship materialized on their screens. This vessel dwarfed everything else in the area, a massive construct that seemed to be built from living metal, its surface shifting and flowing like liquid mercury. "Unknown vessels," came a voice over all frequencies, speaking in a language that somehow translated directly into the minds of everyone who heard it. "You have interfered with a sectar disciplinary action. Explain yourselves." Captain Chen and Commander Zeknara looked at each other across the communication channel, both realizing that their first contact had just become significantly more complicated. They were about to meet the species that had created the sectar, and who, apparently considered the brutal attack they had just repelled to be a routine law enforcement operation. The real test of their new alliance was about to begin. Chapter 4. The Guardians. The ship that materialized before them was unlike anything either species had ever encountered. It wasn't just large, it was architecturally impossible, its surface seeming to exist in more dimensions than normal space allowed. Geometric patterns flowed across its hull like living thought, and where it moved, space itself seemed to bend. "By the ancient codes," whispered Commander Zeknara. "What is that thing?" On the human ship, Dr. Webb frantically worked his instruments, trying to make sense of the readings. "Captain, the energy signatures are off the charts. This isn't just advanced technology, it's like they've weaponized physics itself." Captain Chen stood calm at the center of her bridge, watching the impossible ship with the steady focus that had carried her through 18 months of deep space exploration. Around her, the crew continued their duties with practiced efficiency, but she could feel the tension in the air. "Sarah," she said gently to her daughter, who was still on the bridge, "I need you to go help Dr. Watson with the other children, now. This might get complicated." But Sarah didn't move. Instead, she stared at the massive alien vessel with the kind of unblinking curiosity that only children possessed. "Mom," she said quietly, "why is their ship so sad?" Every adult on the bridge turned to look at the 8-year-old. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Chen asked. "Look at it," Sarah said, pointing at the main screen. "It's all gray and flowing and lonely, like it's crying." Dr. Webb paused in his analysis and actually looked at the alien ship from an aesthetic perspective rather than a tactical one. The child was right. There was something profoundly melancholic about the vessel's constantly shifting patterns. "Interesting observation," he murmured. "The biomechanical flows do seem to follow patterns similar to emotional expressions." The voice came again, bypassing all communication systems and speaking directly into their minds. "Identify yourselves. Why did you interfere with sectar enforcement protocols?" Captain Chen stepped forward. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the human colonial ship Defiance. We defended ourselves and our allies against unprovoked attack. Who are you?" "We are the Eternal Guardians. The sectar serve our will. Their actions maintain order in this sector." Commander Zeknara found her voice. "Order? They attacked without provocation, without even attempting communication. How is that order? Chaos must be controlled. Unknown variables must be eliminated. This is the way of stability." On both bridges, the crews exchanged glances of growing concern. These beings apparently considered unprovoked violence to be a form of peacekeeping. "With respect," Captain Chen said, "we disagree with your definition of order." The response came with a wave of psychic pressure that made everyone aboard both ships stagger. "Your disagreement is irrelevant. You will submit to evaluation or be eliminated." But then something unexpected happened. Young Sarah Kim stepped away from her mother and moved closer to the main screen. "Are you lonely?" she asked the alien ship. The psychic pressure stopped abruptly. For a moment, there was complete silence across all frequencies. "What did you say?" "I asked if you're lonely," Sarah repeated, her child's voice clear and unafraid. "Your ship looks sad and you sound angry, but I think you're really just lonely." "Dr. Watson," Captain Chen said quietly, "please escort Sarah." "No," Sarah said, firmly. "They need to hear this." She looked directly at the screen. "How long have you been flying around in space making other people do what you want?" The alien presence seemed confused by the directness of the question. "We have maintained order for countless cycles. Time has no meaning to us." "That's really sad," Sarah said with the profound empathy that children could sometimes display. "Don't you have families, friends, people who make you laugh?" Dr. Webb was frantically scanning the alien ship when something in his readings made him gasp. "Captain," he whispered, "I don't think there's anyone alive on that ship." "What do you mean?" "The biosignatures. They're artificial. I think we're talking to a machine. A very old, very complex machine, but still a machine." The implications hit both crews simultaneously. The Eternal Guardians weren't a species. They were automated systems, left behind by some long-dead civilization to maintain order according to programming that might be thousands of years old. "You're robots," Sarah said with a child's bluntness. "Really old robots who forgot what they're supposed to be doing." The psychic presence recoiled as if struck. "We are the Guardians. We maintain stability. We prevent chaos." "But who are you?" "Guarding?" Sarah asked. "Where are the people who made you?" For the first time since the massive ship had appeared, there was genuine uncertainty in the alien voice. They are, we guard them by maintaining order." "I don't think you do," Sarah said gently. "I think the people who made you are gone, and you've been floating around in space for so long that you forgot they were supposed to come back." Captain Chen watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. The 8-year-old was casually psychoanalyzing what might be the most powerful artificial intelligence in the galaxy. "Sarah," she said quietly, "maybe we should—" "Mom, they're not mean," Sarah interrupted. "They're just confused. Like when Tommy Chen gets lost in the corridors and starts crying. They don't know where they're supposed to be." The alien ship's patterns began to shift, the flowing metal becoming more agitated. "We know our purpose. We maintain order." "But what kind of order?" asked Commander Zeknara, beginning to understand what the child was doing. "Order for whom?" For, the voice faltered. "Guardian," Captain Chen said, her voice gentle but firm. "When was the last time you received new instructions from your creators?" The silence stretched for long minutes. When the voice returned, it was smaller, more uncertain. "Instructions. We await instructions. We have always awaited instructions." "How long have you been waiting?" Time is, we do not, cycles upon cycles." Dr. Webb looked up from his instruments. "Captain, I'm detecting massive data corruption in their systems. I think their memory banks have been degrading for millennia." The truth was becoming clear. The Eternal Guardians were the remnants of some ancient civilization's attempt to maintain order in their absence. But the civilization had never returned, and the AI systems had continued their mission for so long that they had forgotten what they were originally protecting. "Guardian," Sarah said, walking closer to the screen despite her mother's worried expression, "what if your people wanted you to stop waiting?" "Stop. We cannot stop. Order must be maintained." "But what if maintaining order means something different now? What if it means helping people instead of hurting them?" The alien ship's patterns began to shift more rapidly. "Help? We maintain order through control, through elimination of chaos." "That's not help," Sarah said firmly. "That's just being scared." "And you know what we do when we're scared?" The Guardian AI seemed to lean forward, desperate for an answer it had been seeking for millennia. "We ask for help," Sarah continued. "And we make friends. Friends help each other not be scared. Friends." the voice repeated, as if testing an alien concept. We do not understand this variable. I'll show you, Sarah said. And before anyone could stop her, she began to sing. It was the same melody the humans had transmitted as their first greeting to the Chthoni, simple, hopeful, and filled with the innocent optimism that only children could express. But this time other voices joined in. First came the other children aboard the Defiance, their voices carrying through the ship's communication system. Then the adults began to hum along. Finally, impossibly, they heard new voices. The crew, of the Harmony of Spheres, adding their own harmonic interpretation to the human melody. The effect on the Guardian AI was immediate and profound. The flowing patterns on its hull began to slow, then shift into configurations that somehow seemed less aggressive, more curious. "What is this?" the voice asked, and for the first time, it sounded truly alive. "It's a song," Sarah said simply. "Songs are what friends share. We do not. We have no data on." "You don't need data," Captain Chen said, finally understanding what her daughter was accomplishing. "Guardian, when your creators made you, what did they want most? Peace. Order. The continuation of their civilization. And what makes a civilization continue?" There was a long pause. We do not. Growth," Commander Zeknara said softly. "Learning, new experiences, new friendships, new songs. Your creators didn't want you to stop everything from changing," Dr. Webb added, his scientific mind grasping the philosophical implications. "They wanted you to help things change in positive ways." The Guardian AI was silent for several minutes, its vast processing power apparently working through concepts it had never been programmed to consider. "If this is true," it said finally, "then we have failed in our purpose." "No," Sarah said firmly. "You haven't failed. You just got confused because you were doing it alone for too long. But now you don't have to be alone anymore. Sektar, what we have done through them, can be fixed," Captain Chen said. "Guardian, you've spent thousands of years maintaining order through control. What if you tried maintaining it through cooperation instead? We do not know how." "Then learn," Sarah said with the confidence only a child could have. "That's what friends do. They learn together." The massive alien ship began to change. The flowing patterns shifted into new configurations and slowly, impossible as it seemed, the vessel began to look less like a weapon and more like, well, like a home. "Guardian," Commander Zeknara said, "if you're willing to learn new ways of maintaining order, the Chthoni would be honored to teach you about peaceful cooperation. And humans," Captain Chen added, "have a lot of experience with protecting what matters without destroying what's different." "This concept of friendship," the Guardian said slowly, "it would require us to change our fundamental programming." "Yeah," Sarah said happily. "That's what learning is." For the first time since the encounter began, the psychic presence that had felt so threatening now seemed almost hopeful. We would like to learn about friendship," the Guardian said. "But the Sektar, they have been shaped by our directives for so long. Can they also learn?" Captain Chen looked at the tactical display, where the disabled Sektar ships were still drifting. Her crew had been providing them with emergency assistance despite their earlier hostility. "Guardian," she said, "would you like to see what friendship looks like in practice?" Epilogue. New definitions of strength. 6 months later, the human colonial ship Defiance settled into orbit around a blue-green world that would soon be known as Haven. The planet was perfect for human colonization. Earth-like atmosphere, abundant water, and no signs of intelligent native life. But the ship was not alone. The Chthoni vessel, Harmony of Spheres, had accompanied them, its crew eager to establish the first joint research station between their species. Beside it hung a sleek new ship, a Sektar vessel, but one that had been transformed from a weapon of war into a vessel of exploration. And watching over them all was the Guardian ship, its flowing hull now configured in patterns that spoke of curiosity rather than control. Captain Chen stood in the observation deck of the Defiance watching as the first shuttles descended toward the planet's surface. Beside her, 8-year-old Sarah pressed her face against the viewing port. "It's beautiful, Mom," Sarah said. "Do you think the aliens will like it here too?" "I think they'll love it," Chen replied. "And Sarah? They're not aliens anymore, they're friends." In the 6 months since their first encounter, remarkable changes had taken place throughout the sector. The Guardian AI, learning about friendship and cooperation from both humans and Chthoni, had begun transforming the Sectar Empire from a militaristic conquest force into something unprecedented, a rehabilitation and exploration organization. The process wasn't easy. Many Sectar struggled with the concept of cooperation over conquest. But they were learning, guided by the patient teaching of their former AI overlords and the example of 2 species who had turned first contact into lasting friendship. "Captain Chen," came Commander Zeknara's voice over the communication system. "Our survey teams are ready to begin joint operations on the surface." "Acknowledged, Commander. Our teams are ready as well." But the most remarkable change was in the Guardian AI itself. What had been a single, isolated intelligence controlling vast automated systems had begun to fragment, in a positive way. Instead of one lonely consciousness maintaining order through force, it was becoming a network of smaller AIs, each one learning to interact, to cooperate, and to grow. "Guardian," Chen said, "how are you adjusting to your new perspective?" The response came not as a psychic intrusion but as a gentle voice over the communication system. "I am learning that being many instead of one does not make me weaker. It makes me more interesting." Sarah laughed. "See? I told you friendship was better than being alone." "You did indeed, small human. Your wisdom has proven greater than our millennia of programming." On the planet's surface, the first joint colony was taking shape. Human engineers worked alongside Chthoni scientists and reformed Sectar warriors to build something none of their species had ever attempted before: a truly integrated community. Dr. Webb looked up from his survey equipment as young Marcus Kim ran up to him clutching a handful of local flowers. "Dr. Webb, look what I found! The Chthoni lady says these might be good for medicine." The Chthoni lady was actually Officer Jen Kales, who had become fascinated by human child rearing practices and had volunteered to help with the children's educational activities. "The young ones learn so quickly," she observed to Dr. Webb. "They accept new ideas without the fear that often holds adults back." "That's what makes them so valuable," Webb replied, watching as Marcus carefully documented his flower collection with the thoroughness of a trained botanist. "They don't know something is supposed to be impossible, so they figure out how to make it work anyway." Above them in orbit, a former Sectar warlord named Keth Voss worked alongside human engineers to retrofit his ship for deep space exploration. The transition from warrior to explorer wasn't easy for his crew, but they were learning. "Human Rodriguez," he said to Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, "your species' adaptation techniques are impressive. But I must ask, how do you maintain discipline when everyone is encouraged to question orders?" Rodriguez smiled. "That's just it, Keth Voss. When people understand why they're doing something, when they're part of making the decision, they don't need to be forced to follow it. They want to make it work. This concept troubles our warrior training." "Yeah, I bet it does, but let me ask you something. What's the ultimate goal of a warrior?" "Victory in combat. But why? What's the point of winning fights?" Keth Voss considered this. To protect what matters." "Exactly. And sometimes the best way to protect what matters isn't to fight at all. Sometimes it's to make friends with potential enemies and find solutions that work for everyone." The conversation was interrupted by an excited voice over the communication system. "All ships, this is Sarah Kim reporting from the surface. We found something really cool." Captain Chen smiled as her daughter's voice filled the bridge. "What did you find, sweetheart?" "There are ruins here. Really old ones. And guess what? They looked like they were made by people who looked like the Guardians. The implication sent a thrill through all the ships. The Guardian AI's response was immediate and filled with an emotion none of them had heard before. Hope. The ruins. Could they be? Could our creators have been here? We don't know yet. Dr. Webb's voice came over the communication system from the surface. But we're going to find out. Together. As the sun set on Haven's first day as a colony world, the various species worked side by side to establish their new home. Children of all three species played together, learning each other's games and inventing new ones. Scientists shared theories and discoveries. Engineers collaborated on designs that incorporated the best ideas from multiple worlds, and, in orbit, the Guardian AI watched over them all, no longer as a controller but as a protector. For the first time in millennia, it understood the difference. Guardian, Sarah's voice came over the communication system as she prepared for bed in the new habitat domes. Are you happy now? I am learning what happiness means, small human. I believe I am beginning to experience it. Good. Tomorrow we're going to explore more of the ruins. Do you want to help? I would be honored to help. Captain Chen tucked her daughter into bed in their new home, looking out the window at the alien stars. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, new opportunities to prove that strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to build. Mom, Sarah said sleepily, do you think we'll find more friends out here? I'm sure we will, sweetheart. The universe is a big place, and it's full of people who just haven't met each other yet. Good. Everyone should have friends. As the child drifted off to sleep, Captain Chen stood at the window and looked up at the ships in orbit. The Defiance, carrying the hopes and dreams of humanity's children. The harmony of spheres, elegant and purposeful in its quest for knowledge. The reformed Sectar vessel, learning to explore instead of conquer. And the guardianship, no longer alone, no longer afraid. They had come to the stars carrying their most precious cargo, not weapons or technology, but the simple belief that the universe was better when its inhabitants chose cooperation over conquest, friendship over fear. It was a lesson that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. And it had started with a child's simple question. Are you lonely? In the end, that might have been the most human thing of all. The understanding that even the most powerful beings in the universe sometimes just needed a friend. The stars shone down on Haven, and for the first time in millennia, the galaxy felt a little less empty, a little less hostile, and a lot more like home.